Hi, this is Doug Schaefer. Another episode of the JEM podcast. I have the esteemed Representative Ajay Pittman with me today.
Thank you.
Among other things, she is on the committee for appropriations and budgeting for public safety, which
Yes.
ties into
Criminal justice
reentry,
reform,
criminal
reentry.
justice.
Yes. Among other things,
Yeah.
transportation, all those different things. But law enforcement, public safety deals with the appropriations for the public safety department, which houses the state troopers, the DMV, all of that.
So do you just deal with just the money of that, or actual policies and stuff outside of the appropriations and budget?
Policy as well. When people bring us bills or legislation, or we review a budget, we are reviewing the dollars, but we are reviewing the policy around those dollars as well, and how they work better, how they work efficiently. Are they doing what they are meant to do? Are they really keeping people safe? And that's a big concern for us.
The money is, everything's tied to money.
Yes.
Everything.
You got to pay to play.
I shared this a little bit before we started the video. I was talking with Judge Stoner last night, and he was talking about a department in Philadelphia where before they ever let a district attorney recommend an amount of time for an offender, they have to calculate the cost of incarceration and justify giving this guy 5 years or 7 years. $250,000 worth of incarceration cost versus he stole a lawnmower.
Yeah.
Is that a good use of public?
Exactly.
So there's a lot of innovative ideas out there, and hopefully our leaders like you can maybe come up. I'm not saying that's a great one, but that was just
We're working on them. We're working on them. I mean, I think it's a process, right? We have had these laws, and we have had this policy for a very long time. And so when you have people that are now coming in and changing the criminal justice system, because it's always been popular to be tough on crime and be tough on crime and everything. But now it's like, no, it's costing the state. It's costing people their lives. It's costing people families, and you're displacing families. But you're also costing the state on the front end when they incarcerate someone, but costing them on the back end when they have to put their kids in foster care. So when you look at the dollars, but also when you look at the damage that it's doing, now it's time to say we have to do something better. We have to do something better. People make mistakes. We're all human. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to break rules. Some things are going to happen. So how do we change the process in how we care for those people, or how we discipline those people, or the debt they pay to society?
Absolutely. When I went to prison, it was 1990. So back then, there was two choices: probation or prison. There was no diversion programs. There was no intervention treatments. It was one or the other. And I'm going to just throw a random number out there. 90% of it was the prison because it was in the heart of tough on crime.
Yeah.
And I hear a lot of people, Wes Lane is one of them. He's become a friend of mine. But when he first kind of started becoming a prosecutor, it was the tough on crime stuff. And even as a Christian, a believer, having faith, whether it's Muslim, Jewish, Christian, whatever, there was a certain mindset that said, this is the way we're going to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, in Wes Lane's case, years later, he's like, why did we ever go down that road? It didn't do anybody any good. And being a person of faith, you can't embrace that ideology and think that it's okay.
Exactly.
But they do it every day. And so it's good to see people across both sides of the aisle. Representative Humphrey, indirectly Representative McDougal, and many others, and yourself, working on finding ways. Chris Steele with Team and OCJR,
exactly,
trying to find ways that Oklahoma can get a different reputation than the one that locks up most of the
or the one, one that's number one for incarcerating men, women, and we have to. I think that's the good thing about having new blood in the legislature, about having younger people. We can talk about and get into the weeds about the demographics of the legislature and how it's not representative of the everyday person or the everyday people in Oklahoma, and how it doesn't reflect our demographics here. However, with that being said, we have people that are at the table that are here realizing that we have to change some of our history, that we have to change some of our legacy. So I'm grateful for colleagues like J.J. Humphreys, where we can find common ground. It doesn't matter whether we're on either side of the aisle. This is something that we can find common ground on. And I look at criminal justice reform, right, the title, as a hot topic right now across, not just in Oklahoma, but across the country. But I look at it like education or healthcare. It's so broad.
Right.
You could be on the front end of what the prevention side. You could be on the court side of fines and fees and costs. Or you could be on the backside, kind of how I am with criminal justice reform and reentry and helping people reenter society. And I think how I got to being on the reentry side of it is that all of those other things need work.
Right.
Absolute prevention would be the best key. But that's just like telling someone abstinence, right? It obviously hasn't proved to work so far, and not going about anyone's faith, but just saying prevention would be great if it was the real thing and if it worked for everybody, but it doesn't. So how do we, after someone has paid their debt, whatever their crime is, after they have served their time, whatever they did, 6 months, 10 years, 20 years, whatever that looks like, how do we allow them to re-enter society and make them whole again? It's not, because at that point, for me, you paid your debt. It's not about your past. It's not about the crime. It's not about what you did. It's about, how do you move forward? How do you become a productive member of our society? How do you get a job and pay taxes? How do you not go back in? How do you take care of your family? How do you get your kids back? How do you use a cell phone? All of those things that people are not probably teaching you. How do you deal with your temperament? How do you deal with getting a job or crossing the street or driving a car? All those things that now you have not been allowed to do for an extended period of time. How can we sign you up for insurance? How can we sign you up for Medicaid expansion? How can we sign you up for these things and teach you how to live a productive life? Because if I'm being completely honest, they don't teach students that either. People graduate from high school not knowing how to fill out an apartment application. So, but people expect us to live on our own at 18. It's the sentiment that you're supposed to be an adult and live on your own at 18, and that's not reality. So reentry has been very important to me and has become near and dear to my heart, because you want people to feel like people again. You want them to be able to enjoy a cocktail or watch Netflix or take the train or hop on an airplane. What does having a full life look like? And the better job we do about reentering people into society really helps us on prevention.
Well, again, this goes back to almost 30 years now for me. 10 years ago, just 10 years ago, when I was released, and I don't want to offend anybody by this, but whether it's black, white, Indian, Asian, whatever, my best friend in this world is a 58-year-old black man.
Yeah.
He's the godfather of my daughter. He was my mentor and my big brother in prison. He served 31 years.
Wow.
He showed me that you could be a Christian without becoming a victim, and you could still have it, not plug into all that stuff. He was a phenomenal mentor for me. He's actually an employee of mine now. He got out 2 weeks after I did.
Wow.
And as long as I've got a job, he's got a job. And we're just, so it's not a race thing for us. And we both saw a lot of the challenges when we got out 10 years ago. There wasn't, and if there was, nobody was telling anybody about.
Exactly.
He had a job for Church's Fried Chicken.
Wow.
Church's Fried Chicken. They let him work for a week, then ran his background and came back and told him, sorry, you can't work for us.
You can't work for us.
If you can't get a job at Church's Chicken as an ex-offender,
how do you
what
provide
are you supposed
for your
to do?
family? Yeah.
Fortunately for him and for me, we both had wives that were out here waiting for us. So we had that extra support. Probably the largest percentage of men and women coming out don't have that support. No. So what does society expect them to do when they get told no by Church's Fried Chicken?
Exactly.
That they can't have a job.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, from my experience, a lot of the people, I'm not going to say, because there's people that are just waiting for the next chance to offend. Drug addicts that haven't gotten any help. But there's a lot of people that don't want to be criminals.
Right.
But we force them into the only thing they have ever known, and then we get mad at them when they try to provide for their families.
Exactly.
And so that's one of the things why reentry is really important for me. I had help. Wayne had help, my friend, but a lot of the guys don't.
No.
And people like yourself, there's so many people that are starting to. Chris Steele has done some great work with State Question 780. with everybody that they don't care what side out 781 has not helped anybody because nobody's done anything with it.
Right,
But,
right.
But,
And how long is that process, and what does that look like, right? That's a big thing for us. But you're completely, you hit the nail on the coffin. I mean, we have people that come out that don't have transportation to get from where they're being released from. They don't have money for clothes. They have a job, but they don't have transportation to get to and from their job. They don't even know where to start a lot of times. And a lot of people want to work with people who only have a short sentence or who are getting released in 3 months. But it's like, no, there's some skills that could be given to people while they are there. There could be leadership training, anything that helps them come out and be a productive member of society. And we are looking at that. That's one of the things, like you said, no one was telling anybody about it if there were out there. And that's one of the things I would love to see as a resource guide, whether it's from the churches who do faith-based groups that help people who are re-entered society, or even people who are still incarcerated, just as involved people. Or if it's people that are doing workforce development, because you have people that have workforce development programs that'll come pick you up and get you trained on the job. It could even be apprenticeship programs where your background doesn't matter. And as long as you can pass a drug test, you have a GED or high school diploma, and you're above 18, they give you a job and they train you and they place you. That resource needs to be given to these people who are incarcerated 6 months before they get out, so they can have a strategic plan. 9 months before they get out, so they can have a strategic plan.
You can't wait till they get out to try to help them.
No.
Men, especially, don't want to ask for help. So if you haven't earned their trust before they ever get out, start working. As soon as they hit that gate, they're a free man. They're not going to ask for help. Women are far more likely to ask for help because a lot of them have children that they're coming home to, and but a married, even a guy who's got a wife and kids, he's not going to ask for help if you haven't already reached him before he gets out. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because a lot of people, they want to talk about this side of the fence, but they don't realize that you have to start before the offender ever gets out.
Yeah. With little things, resume building, learning how to use a computer, a typing class, something that says, okay, I am getting my skill set together to get out. Even having this conversation, some people are not even comfortable having conversations with other people because they've been so traumatized. And so how do you sit in front of someone and learn how to introduce yourself? I would love to see a year-long process of like there being a strategic program that takes them step by step, quarter by quarter, even if there's a setback in their sentence, right? Even if they get a violation, they get found with a cell phone, whatever. We hear all that little bitty stuff, right? All the little stuff that get people a setback. Even if it's a setback, if their still release date is still within that year, leave them on that program. Let's help them with job placement. We have so many people in our country, even in our state, that are rallying behind, that are willing to hire people who have been just as involved. Let's get all those people in a packet. Let's put their numbers, their phone numbers, their email addresses, and let's give it to those inmates, and let's give it to those caseworkers. And maybe we have to have some public-private partnerships. One of the states at my interim study that I had come speak was the state of Georgia. And it was really an initiative that their governor at the time was looking at, and they went from 2011 to 2015 doing an initiative to create their own agency. It's called the Justice Department of Community Supervision. They were housed in the governor's office, and then they were able to create their own agency. They got some grants from the federal government to start the funding to create the agency that lasted over 3 to 5 years, and then they had time to absorb their budget. And the state had time to plan for that budget. But they do community supervision, whether it's housing placement, whether it's job placement, all of that. Even people that are on probation, they still help them. It's not just you come to check in and take your drug test. It's community supervision. And so that was one of the models that I was looking at when trying to figure out, okay, what can Oklahoma do? What's our next step? We have the partners. How do we get the partners all at one table in one space to say, what's our strategic plan for helping these people?
So having done that study a couple months ago, I guess it was just right about 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Following that interim study, and as we approach this legislative session, is there any specific? I know there's a lot of corrections stuff that is going to be introduced in some form or fashion. But whether from yourself or from your own authorship or somebody else, is there anything that you know of that's going to be introduced that deals with reentry specifically?
Well, I can only speak for myself because just a little bit of information about the legislative process. Our bill deadlines to have our policy in is not until December.
Okay.
So we're in the process in November of working on them, but we may be a little bit behind because we're going into special session to talk about redistricting. So people are just now really getting their bills together, talking to our writers, crafting their ideas, especially now that interim studies are fully over, because that's why we have interim studies. So we can study a topic and see if we want to present legislation on that. And so we won't really know who's presenting what, whether it be on corrections or reentry, unless they publicize it on their own social media until about January, when you see those bills actually come in for bill deadline. And we actually list who kind of authored what. That's when the general public will probably know and we'll be able to see everyone's topic. But for me, yes, I will be reintroducing a bill that talks about reentry, that creates a reentry pilot program very similar to what I described, that talks about getting DLC together, getting a coalition of community partnerships.
That's all that bill is. There wasn't a lot that was crafted into it yet. It was more like a shell.
It was, yeah.
I think I remember.
Just a
that.
shell program, because I'm the type of person, I don't like mandates. I don't like to tell DLC what they're going to do and not know their process with
but
it,
the basic design was really written well.
Thank you.
And I can't believe it didn't even get a
Well, there's some politics behind that. It made it through committee. There's some politics behind that. We had the Sarah Stitt Act that went through, and so they wanted to focus on that and push that through, and so that's why we're just going to re-enter it this year. Good legislation takes time, and we know that. Especially we had a COVID year where a lot of things didn't even get heard. So last year we were really kind of picking up where we left off. And we had to do a lot of good work to get kind of Oklahoma back on the straight and narrow. So this year I'm excited to reintroduce it. And because that it didn't go through the full process, I'm able to add more teeth to it. Because now we've studied it. Right. Now we've garnered more support. Now people know, oh my God, this is something she's been working on for a while. Now we know that she's serious about it. And she's gotten some community partners like yourself who can come attest to how this would help their life. And we got partners like Chris Steele or the Sue Ann Arnaud Foundation or things like that, people like that, the Urban League, who have been doing an expungement fair, and they were able to take 20 people, I think 19 to 20 people, and expunge their records so that they could read free of cost, carried it through the process. So those are the partners and the support that we want going into this legislative process to talk about this pilot program, so that they're already at the table when we do this. So once it's enacted, that committee is basically almost already compiled, and we can start studying how to move that forward.
That's a really good idea. But you got to have partners. You got to have the community.
You got to have partners.
If you ask the state to fund it all and do it all, first of all, I think it would just get messed up. But secondly, that's a lot of money and a lot of time, resources that our government needs to focus on the bigger pictures and let the community come in. Give some guidance, but let the community come in and do a lot of that.
Well, and there's a lot of grants out there too. We have people wanting to fund this. We have people wanting to support this. And so while there's grant money out there, while there's infrastructure funding out there, a lot of times people look to the state and they think we should fund everything all the time. And we just don't have the budget to do that. I would love for DHS to have a surplus. I would love for the Healthcare Authority to have a surplus, right? Yeah. I would love for the State Department of Health or the Department of Substance Abuse or the Department of Mental Health to have a surplus. They need it. These people need services, but we just don't. And that's the reality of that. So we got to be smart about our money. But when you have grants that you've seen other states get, and you have money that can come to us that can help us move these initiatives forward, and those are the times where you have to tap in.
Absolutely.
Those are the times where you say, okay, well, we got the support, and we can do it. If we can do it with a $50,000 grant, okay, well, we can work up to a $100,000 grant. Start small. I'm not saying we got to go into every prison that we have in the state of Oklahoma, but okay, let's start with one.
Absolutely. No, and when you figure we have been number one for, I think we're number 2 or 3, maybe even 3. I think we're number 2 in per capita incarceration now. But even for years, we were number 1, and still are number 1 for women incarceration per capita. So if you recognize this is one of your biggest problems, and you see other states with much smaller issues in the same, why not ask for the money and try to do something with that money? Now, Chris Steele, he passed State Question 780, and that's kind of a hot topic for some people. Not for me. I think it was a great bill. I think that it was a huge step for Oklahoma to be courageous to do that. But it took going around the legislators and doing it as a community initiative to get that passed. Now, Representative Humphreys and some other, they want to add to or evolve or add some stuff to that.
Okay.
And I've got my own personal experience. So I'm not 100% on Chris Steele's or the OCJR side or on somebody like Representative Humphreys' side, because I've just got my own personal experience. Because all of my crimes were all drug related. Ended up in the loss of the life of somebody who came into something while I was burglarizing him. Accidental death, but still a violent crime, and it was because I was high on drugs. If I hadn't been high on drugs, I never even would have been in that house. So for me, when I see and what I read to be basically carte blanche for drug offenders, there's never a felony for you. There's never prison time. There's never anything other than a misdemeanor, just cycling it out. For me, I don't think that's a good idea, because to me, every offender, every person, I hate using the term offender, every person who chooses to use drugs, you never know what that next decision or that next action is going to be after you're high.
Because that's not the real person, right?
And you're severely diminished in your ability to control yourself or your inhibitions or the circumstances that evolve. So at some point, that choice to use drugs has the potential to impact an innocent person's life, like in my case. So while I completely agree that we don't want our state to be strapped with felony convictions and background, people can't get jobs because they're a drug addict or a small-time property crime, at what point, if at all, do you think there should be some form of increased accountability? Because the way I read what Justin Humphreys is trying to do, he doesn't want to at all change the way that it is. He just wants to implement some form of progressive intervention in the person's life. You know, if it's your 3rd or your 4th or your 5th offense, at what point do we say, okay, you're just gaming the system.
Right.
We've got to do something to protect the innocent people. So what are your, and I'm not saying, I've shared my perspective, but and I know both those guys have different ones too. So what is your perspective in having been involved with some of this?
I think we really need a more holistic approach. I don't think prison is everything, but I do come from a stance where bought sense is better than told, as my grandma used to say.
And now, for the record, I'm not saying we have to incarcerate them, but there has to be some form of something done.
Absolutely, because you still have to hold people accountable. And a lot of times when you don't hold them accountable, that gives them a free pass to say, I got away with it, I can get away with it again. Sometimes.
And that's the fear
and that's the fear, and that's the concern. I'm very middle of the road, middle of the lane, because I do think substance abuse, drug abuse, whether it's opioids or prescription drugs or anything like that, it is an illness. No. It is something chemically going on within your body that it's altering your mind, that it's altering your movements, that's altering your behavior. You're not in full control. You are not your full self. However, some of that is some accountability. Right. You know, we have people that are accidentally drugged. We have some people that experiment and get hooked on things. And so there's a fine line with the accountability, right? Because you don't know everyone's situation. And when you make a law, you have to realize I represent House District 99. I'm not just making a law for House District 99. Right. Any law I make goes in full effect statewide, and it could be there for 100 years. So you have to be smart and talk to people like you. Talk to different people who've dealt with drugs and alcohol abuse. Talk to those providers. Okay? I want clinicians in here. I want people who look at the brain and look at the science behind what someone does while their brain is on these different chemicals, how that alters their behavior, but what they really can be held accountable with. What do they remember? What do they not remember? I don't think you should have a free pass, and I do think it's an illness and it shouldn't automatically warrant incarceration, right? Or a felony, because you really could get clean and say this was no fault of mine. However, there comes a point where you said fifth, sixth, seventh, 10th. You're like, okay, you have to take in the situation, because I think everything is situational. That's like someone saying, well, do you like me? Well, I gotta know you to like you. If you don't know someone, you don't know their history, you don't know their crime, you don't know their pattern, you don't know their social, economic circumstances, things like that. Are they going home in that environment? Like, you can take a kid out of that environment and say, okay, we're gonna clean you up, you're gonna go to church with us, we're gonna take you to this summer program. But at the end of the day, if they're going back to that home where no one is taking them out of that environment, out of that home, how does that change? So for me, it's very situational, and I think we need a board, or we need judges, attorneys, clinicians, all there to look at that.
It's a very extremely complex issue.
It is.
And this is no offense to Chris Steele, but one law that has done a lot of good is nowhere near enough that needs to be done. So I'm not knocking. I'm saying more needs to be done. And it has to be holistic, like you said. We can't make it just about accountability or intervention.
No.
It has to address the family side, the victim side.
Exactly.
I mean, there's so many dynamics, and we always tend to see victims and criminal justice system, which is why I just call it the justice system, because the victims are just as much a part of this system as anybody else, but we're always vying, competing for resources, and it needs to be more holistic in the approach. And
we have to. It's not. And I think sometimes when people get a charge or a crime where they have a sheet, we dehumanize them immediately. Yeah. But that's the same for elected officials. People don't realize we get sick, we get tired, we may have anxiety. Yeah. You never know. We may lose a loved one. They expect us to show up, period. It doesn't matter. And so really trying to bring, humanize our title, our position, but humanize these people that this stuff is happening to. It doesn't always make them a bad person. It doesn't always make them. Now you have some people that are doing it on purpose.
The predators, they deserve to spend a long time in prison, but that's really
a small population.
That's not the majority.
That's not the majority. Some people get caught up. But for me, I would like to see a study done on it. I don't make premature decisions when it comes to people's lives, because I guess it's a good and bad thing. But when you look at the qualifications of being an elected official, you have to be an Oklahoma resident, you have to live in your district for 6 months, and you have to be 21 for the House and 25 for the Senate. That doesn't say I have a degree in criminal justice. That doesn't say I have a medical degree to sit on public health. That doesn't say I have a finance degree to deal with appropriations. Right. Now, we do have qualifications when we come in here. Absolutely. People elect us based on that. But we are not the experts on all of these topics that we are making laws about, which is why it behooves us to be smart enough to bring those experts in, to bring in the people that deal with this every day, and to bring in the people who have lived experience, so that when we make a decision, it is an informed decision, because our decisions have lasting effects and lasting repercussions. And so that's kind of how I feel about it. I do think there should be some level of accountability, but I also think we should look at the whole person and really understand how to look at the whole person.
And last night when I was speaking with Judge Stoner, he gave a great example of that. There was a young lady that I came to know through this class that I teach for OSU that went through the Center for Social Innovation, and she's just one of the sweetest gals that you'll know. She spoke at the graduation last night. And he said, Doug, but what you don't know is during her progression through drug court and through the program, she probably had 30 or 40 sanctions imposed against her, because as she grew, she was still dealing with, and if you just take her at any one point in there, you can say, oh, she's still messing up. But you have to look at when she started and where she's at. Now, she's still messed up, but look how far she's come from when she started. Let's continue to help her. Let's give her the sanction. Let's continue to help her towards that end. So we can't make those judgments if a person's a second or a third time. I get that. And I don't want to think that, having gone through that I'm 100% on the extreme conservative side. Because I'm not. My wife is extreme conservative. She gets mad at me sometimes because she doesn't like talking politics at all. She gets
You
mad
can
at me
agree to
because
disagree. It's okay.
Because I will play the devil's advocate sometimes because I like to see all the different perspectives.
Yes, you have to. You have to, because those are the perspectives in the world. And I talk about it. It's like potty training. Like, you teach your kid a system. Mm-hmm. You're gonna show them how to do it. They're gonna mess up. Yep. They're gonna pee in the bed. They're gonna pee in the diaper. They're gonna mess up the diaper. They're gonna mess up the pull up. But that's why you keep putting the pull up on them. You let them wear underwear during the day. You take them to the bathroom after they eat. Like, it's like training. Yeah. And because we don't have a system that is training our babies in high school, we don't have a system that is equipping them in middle school and high school to really be the best member of society. We're not giving them whole life skills. We're not giving them basic life skills. We're not giving them training about the laws. We have a book in Oklahoma. It's a little pamphlet. It's called You're 18 Now. What Should You Know? We don't hand those out at graduation. That's not mandated. It's at the Bar Association. You have to know it. So you're sending these kids out here at 18 as soon as they graduate and saying, here's a whole book of laws that you're supposed to follow that you don't know. Yeah. And we don't teach them that. Here's a whole world that you're supposed to get a job in, find a house, find an apartment, deal with these different things, deal with social media, deal with social anxiety, all of this. And we don't equip them with that. We teach them to a test, but we don't give them holistic support or holistic education. And so if we're not training them in high school and middle school, when they become an offender or they get hooked on drugs or they make a mistake and it affects the trajectory of their life, we're still not giving training. We're just giving punishment, knowing that we didn't train them on the front end.
We have to share some of that blame.
We do. And now I'm happy to be sitting at a table or be at a time in our state, at a time in our society where we're getting that, where we're starting to look at the whole person, where we're destigmatizing mental health. We're destigmatizing people that have been justice involved. You're sitting right here in an elected official's office and you named 3, 4, or 5 while we've had this conversation. Who cares what your offense was? Look at what you're doing now, not only helping yourself, but helping others and having conversations with the people who have the power to create change. That's what it's about. It's just like the circle of life. You got to come full circle in some things. And we're going to make mistakes. I'm not perfect. I don't claim to be perfect. I just happen to fall into a legacy that forfeited me a life that was healthy. I fell into an environment that forfeited me a life that was healthy and gave me some different experiences than my counterparts. Doesn't make me better than them. It just said I had a different environment. And so my goal being here as an elected official, I always tell my interns, don't grow up to be like me. Take what you can from me and use it in ways that it helps you because you're your own person. Every person sitting in a jail cell throughout our country is their own person with their own story. And our justice system does not look at them like that. They look at them in the case when they're pleading the case and they're defying all these details, but they don't look at them like that when they're defending them or when they need to teach them or help them or even rehabilitate them. And that is something that not just Oklahoma, but our country has to do a better job of, or we're going to keep getting the same results.
And that's sad. And like you said, though, we're Oklahoma, which is surprising because we're the heart of the Bible Belt, and my fellow Christians don't be mad at me.
Hey, well, I'm a Christian
but we have gone so far being that the old mentality of you beat them to Jesus with the Bible, but Oklahoma's changing dramatically.
Yeah,
just the last couple of years has been historic in the perspective and the willingness of people to address this issue. But still on that subject, but a little bit different.
Okay.
780 took a lot of the drug offenses and a lot of property offenses in an attempt to help almost 60,000 people in Oklahoma with felony backgrounds.
Absolutely.
Who really shouldn't have a felony background and shouldn't be harmed by that because it didn't really harm anybody else. What, if any, are there other populations within our current prison system or that we send to prison routinely? Would you say probably could be added to those lists of this doesn't merit prison time? Let's get the people that are in prison for this out and quit sending people to prison for these offenses, and let's focus on putting the predators in the prison system. Do you think that there are other populations
Absolutely.
that are like that?
I think we can talk about youth and child family services. If we talk about how many people we incarcerate for child support, instead of
Yeah.
having that conversation and figuring